This morning we're starting this new series. In the Gospel of John, the identity of Jesus is revealed to us through 7 miracles. And John refers to them as signs. Okay, so for the next 7 weeks, we're going to look at each sign one at a time. And if you had no idea why there were all these images, each one of those images was one, a famous painting of one of the signs. So as you come to the series for the next few weeks, you can kind of check that out and see. It's pretty cool. So this morning, we're going to start with what we might call Jesus' coming out party. For nearly 30 years, the one who crafted the universe with his voice made a living as an average guy crafting lumber with his hands. Now, he was a bender of wood, a carpenter, an average Joe. And yet, he was God incognito. And his miraculous powers appear to have been suspended for 3 decades. Okay, but at the wedding at Cana, the woodbender became a waterbender. Jesus manipulated the molecular structure of water and he turned it into wine. Okay, 757 bottles of wine, no less. And we're told it wasn't just wine, it was fine wine, like the finest of wines. Jeff, is it me or is this ringing? It's definitely ringing. Maybe turn it down a little bit. Maybe take a little bass out. There we go. Is that better? Is that a little better? Okay, good. I felt like I had, for a moment, every once in a while, it makes me feel bigger about myself than I actually am, because I feel like I have the voice of the Lord. This is a little better. So Jesus turns the water into wine, and this event, as you can imagine, it got people's attention. It set into motion a chain of events, and this act of Jesus was just the beginning. There are 34 distinct miracles recorded in the Gospels, with countless more, we're told, that went unrecorded. John's Gospel spotlights 7 miracles that each unveil 7 different dimensions of Jesus' power. And so as we kick this thing off this morning, we're going to read these sacred words, and I'd like us to do something different than we normally do at our very informal church service at Brookview. Throughout history, Christ followers, out of reverence, will sometimes stand when Scripture is read. And so this morning, I would like us to do that together. We're not on our way to becoming like a Catholic service or anything. I thought it would be cool. So, would you stand as we read these sacred words together? This is John chapter 2. If you have a Bible with you, you can open to John chapter 2, starting in verse 1. It says, "On the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, 'They have no more wine.' 'Woman, why do you involve me?' Jesus replied. 'My hour has not yet come.' His mother said to the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.' Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, 'Fill the jars with water,' so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, 'Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet.' They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, 'Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now.'" All right, you can be seated. Now, I don't know about you. I think this is a weird miracle. Like healing lepers, that makes sense to me. Healing the blind and the deaf and the sick, in fact, pretty much healings of any kind make sense to me. Feeding thousands of hungry people, that makes sense to me. Raising dead people to life, that makes sense to me. Like usually with the miracles of Jesus, you notice there's an obvious need, okay? But is running out of wine at a wedding a crisis? And some of you would say immediately, yes. Yeah, yes it is. Okay, but in the first century, it was an even bigger deal. And so let me give you a little wedding background from first century. In that day, a wedding was a spectacularly large event. A wedding celebration would last up to as long as a week. Okay? And usually an entire town would be invited. And pretty much everyone made the effort to come because it was considered an insult to receive an invitation to a wedding and then not go. Now, obviously, if that's the case, okay, a wedding took very careful planning, and it took an enormous budget. I mean, weddings were a major investment for a family. I mean, you think about this, to invite the whole town to a banquet that would last up to 7 days, to feed them and provide for them. This was like a really, really big deal. And so to run out of wine wasn't just like a bummer. It was a huge insult to the guests. So this was like more than embarrassing, okay? It broke the strong, unwritten laws of hospitality. And in that day and age, you don't do that. And you have to kind of keep in mind, it's not like they had this long list of alternative beverages. You know, if they ran out of wine, everyone just didn't order like Diet Coke, you know, or Orange Crush or Mountain Dew or whatever. So to invite the whole town to a week-long party and then to run out of wine, that's a big deal. Okay, it was a shameful thing to do. Now we're told that this wedding takes place in Cana, which is about 9 miles north of Nazareth, where Jesus grew up. Okay, so it's very possible that Jesus knew this couple pretty intimately. It's also possible that his mother Mary was playing some sort of official role. It looks like that's the way it was because Mary was apparently among the first to know that they had run out of wine. And Mary was extremely concerned about the situation. So she goes to Jesus with an incredibly bold request. She very simply says, they have no more wine. And yet she says so little, or so much by saying so little. And when Jesus responded, he was a carpenter no more. Now here's what I find odd about this whole scene. If you read between the lines here, you get the sense that Mary is asking Jesus to do something that he's reluctant to do. Like, she wants the miraculous, and he's reluctant. And so the natural question is, like, why? Why is Jesus resistant to doing this at first? And scholars and theologians have debated that question every which way. But here's what makes sense to me. Mary didn't understand, because she understood he was the Messiah, but she did not understand that the miracle road was a one-way street to the cross. Once Jesus was thrust into the spotlight, it was only a matter of time until things ran their course. So Jesus responds to her simple statement by saying, "Why do you involve me? My time has not yet come." And yet, even so, he performs the miracle. Now, I don't know about you, but this raises like a significant issue for me. If this really wasn't his time, if this wasn't the best thing to do, then why in the world would Jesus go ahead and do it? I mean, clearly Jesus understood more than Mary. He's the Son of God. He's God in the flesh. He knows better than Mary what's best, and yet he honors her request. You think about it. Like, if Jesus had another plan, and his plan was the best plan, why in the world would he allow Mary to influence his decision? Why would he give Mary any say-so over events as critical as this? I mean, this is more than fixing a problem in the moment. This is Jesus revealing his identity much earlier than he planned. And yet her request of him moved him somehow. And you think about that and you go, why in the world would Jesus say yes? And I think that this whole line of questioning applies to you and me right now. To me, this is basically the same question that we really could ask of prayer. And I will tell you that for me, for various reasons at various times, prayer has always been a struggle for me. And in the early years of my faith, a lot of it had to do with the fact that the whole idea of prayer didn't make any sense to me. And the way I thought about it went like this. Okay, if God is all good and all powerful and concerned about us, doesn't he already want the best for us? And so wouldn't he already be doing for us as much as he ever can? So what in the world then are we asking for when we pray? Are we asking him to care more? Doesn't he already care as much as he ever could? Are we asking him to do more? I mean, shouldn't we assume that he's already doing everything that he can? Are we informing him of some problem that he doesn't know about? Doesn't he already know everything? You see the problem that I was having with prayer? I mean, if we can't inform him about anything, if we can't empower him to do anything, if we can't get him to care more, then what in the world are we doing when we pray? And so it bugged me, because it was like, how in the world can prayer ever possibly work? And it won't surprise you that because I wrestled with this, I didn't have much of a prayer life. It's interesting though, because I still prayed. And what's also interesting to me is that I became a Christian when I was 20, and yet I prayed even when I was an atheist. I don't know if maybe you're sitting in here and you're somebody who's like not sure about the existence of God, but you realize you've prayed. Like even as an outspoken atheist, I mean like a committed atheist, when there was a crisis in my life, like a real crisis that I knew was way beyond me, a few times in my life, I prayed. It was like in those moments I was just compelled to pray. And when you don't believe in the existence of God, that's weird. And it was both like comforting and unsettling to me at the same time. And that's like the thing about prayer. It comes natural, and yet it's not natural at all. It's like the weirdest thing. There are times when our heart just cries out to pray, and yet it can feel so unnatural and so weird. But this cerebral objection that I had to the whole idea of prayer, it was really a major barrier for me in my walk with Christ. And slowly I came to realize that my understanding about prayer was pretty limited. That there was a whole lot more to this. And when I started to unpack it all, it changed everything for me. So this morning what I want to do is just walk you through some things that have been helpful to me that I've come to understand over the years about prayer. And the first thing for me is that I discovered over time that the main purpose of communicating with God, and that's all prayer is, the main purpose of communicating with God has very little to do with making requests. The main purpose of communicating with God is to build a faith-filled, loving relationship with him. When we think of prayer, so often we put it in terms of really only making requests. But really, when you think about it, a relationship needs to be so much more than that if it's going to be strong. For those of you that are married, I want to challenge you to a little experiment. For this next week, okay, so from tonight until next Saturday night, I want you to limit your communication with your spouse to this. You are not to communicate in any way, verbal or otherwise, except to make requests of each other. Now, how many of you are excited for trying that out this week? Does that sound awesome? I mean, look, obviously I'm kidding. Like, please don't do this. I want to be responsible for the fallout. Okay, but try to imagine a marriage where the only communication is requests. That's it. Like, that's not really a relationship at all. And that's not what people envision when they're standing like googly-eyed at the altar together. But here's what can happen. We can let our relationship with God deteriorate, and we can let it become almost exclusively, our communication with him, almost exclusively requests. And if we begin to view prayer exclusively as requests, not communion with God, okay, we're missing the point big time. And for some of you might ask, well, okay, but like, what else would we talk about? And I think the answer to that is, well, like, what wouldn't you talk about? I mean, you could talk to him about things that you're excited about. You talk to him about things that scare you. You talk to him about what you're seeing in the world. You talk to him about things that are happening in your life. If good things are happening, then you talk about that. You thank him. You celebrate with him. If bad things are happening, or you're frustrated, then you talk about that. If you see something beautiful, maybe between people or some other kind of beauty, you enjoy that with him. You talk about that with him. If you're having issues in a relationship of some kind, you talk to him about that. If things are going well in a relationship, it's a new relationship. If you're single and you haven't wanted to be, and now you talk to God about that. If you aren't sure with, what to do with something in your life, you talk to him about that. Now, in all these arenas, okay, your discussion with him over time might escalate to some kind of request. But in many cases, the essence of the communication isn't really about requests. It's simply about you being with him. It's communing with him. It's about a relationship. It's about cultivating this relationship that has depth. Now, I think about Jesus and Mary. She comes to him with this particular request in this very specific moment. But the truth is, okay, Mary had a much broader relationship with Jesus prior to that. I was struck by the reality of that years ago. I was watching The Passion of the Christ. And the film, as most of you know, is about the death of Christ. And it begins in the Garden of the Ring, and it ends with him walking out of the tomb. And it's brutal. It's a brutal display of what happened. But as the film follows Jesus through the final hours of his life, there are scenes every once in a while that will flash back to earlier in his life. For instance, as he's being nailed to the cross, he prays for those that are kneeling him. And it flashes back. There's a scene where it flashes back, and he's teaching on the hillside. And he's talking to these huge crowds about loving your enemies. And to me, those kinds of scenes were really what made the film great and powerful. Several of the flashback scenes involved Mary, the mother of Jesus. And one of the ones that really hit me was something that I never really considered. Never really considered the cross experience from the perspective of Mary. But Mary is watching as Jesus is carrying the cross. And he's suffering horribly, and he's beaten, and he's bloody, and he's dehydrated, and he's weak, and he's stumbling, and then finally he falls, just like collapses. Now, in this moment, Mary is helpless. She can do nothing. This is her son, and she can do nothing. And so it pans in real close on her face. And you can see all of this pain in her eyes as she watches. And then the scene flashes back to her memory. Jesus is maybe 3 years old, and he's running and he's playing. And like all 3-year-olds do sometimes, he falls and he skins up his knee. And as mothers of 3-year-olds do, Mary rushes over and she swoops him up and she hugs him. And then she starts tending to his wound. And so she's watching Jesus and she's remembering. And then the scene goes back to real time, Jesus carrying the cross. And you sense that her internal instinct is just like maternal instinct is just kicking in. She wants nothing more than to just be able to go rescue him. She can't. And so you see the tears and they're welling up. And I just was watching this and I thought that was such a creative, powerful way to show the scene of the cross. And I thought it was brilliant because it shows this bond that in reality they had like a lifetime of these moments together. I mean, Mary was more than a courageous woman of faith. She was simply a mother that loved her son. Now, there was another scene that I really liked, and I think there are probably a few people that didn't like it because it's not a scene that's described in the Bible. It's just this like hypothetical this moment that Jesus and Mary maybe could have had something like this. But I like to see it because it's different and it's fun and it's cool and you see Jesus sort of in a little different way. So let's watch this. Check it out. It's about 2 minutes. Now, this is totally made up. But it gets me thinking about the reality that they must have had so many moments. I mean, all of these moments, time after time. They have this relationship. And today we're looking at a specific scene, this moment at a wedding where she makes a request. But the truth is, their relationship was so much more. And this is kind of weird, but like, this is really weird, actually. Go with me for a second. Let's say that someday, okay, in the kingdom of God, on the other side, I'm walking around heaven. And I have like all of eternity. Okay, so I imagine that one day I bump into Mary. And so I say, wow, you're married. That's awesome. And she's like, yep. And so like I rack my brain for what to say because this is my fear with celebrities that I'll run into one and just like totally freeze up and have nothing cool to say, just nothing natural. So in the moment with Mary, I decide to ask, the one question that probably everyone asks, the one question she will have been asked by that time several million times. I say, so, what was it like to be the mother of Jesus? And here's what I'm thinking. She has so much to talk about. Like, so much of what it was like when he was a kid, or watching him become a man, all the moments they had together. Okay? Now, I'm speculating here, but I wonder if, the water into wine moment in that discussion would even come up. Like, I wonder if her connection to him would be so much more important to her. Like, if maybe she would talk about all the special moments that they had, the way that he loved her, the way that she loved him. I wonder if, like, the water to wine incident wouldn't even crack the top 100. Okay, now this is really rabbit trail into weirdness. Like me and Mary having a convo in heaven one day. Let me bring this back to the point. What's the point? The point is, it's always the relationship that matters the most. Requests are only a small little tiny part of any real relationship. And here's what I know about me. The times in my life when I have been most connected to God, the times when I feel his strength the most, the times when I start to really see the world the way that he does, the times when those are the times that my communication with God starts to go far beyond just requests. It's when I'm sharing my heart with him about like everything, and he's sharing his heart with me. Now, I mentioned earlier that prayer has always been tough for me. And the truth is that even though I know that this connectedness with him, this ability to commune, just simply commune with God, to this, talk to God about everything, relationship, even though I know this is the thing that gives me life, even though I know it's the thing that I most need, it is so easy to allow my walk with God to deteriorate into a situation where my prayer just becomes an occasional request that I make in a crisis. And so I just want to pause right here and ask you about you. Now, some of you aren't followers of Christ yet, and this whole idea is foreign to you, and that's okay. But for those of you that are followers of Christ, what does your prayer life look like these days? Like, what kinds of things do you talk with God about? Maybe you've got something going on and you're really worried about it in your life right now. Maybe it has to do with your job. Maybe it has to do with your finances. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's a relationship. It could be your marriage or a friendship or something going on with a coworker. Or maybe something is happening with somebody that you dearly love, one of your kids or an old friend or your sister or whatever. And you realize you're thinking about this thing, whatever it is, you're thinking about it all the time. But honestly, if you look at it, you realize I'm not talking with God about it. Now, my point is not to make anyone feel guilty. What does guilt do? Guilt just causes us to hide from God more. The point is, and this is what's so beautiful, the point is, he's inviting you into so much more. Like Jesus says in the classic passage of Revelation, he says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." Maybe you're in a spot in your walk with Jesus where you realize, I haven't opened that door in a long, long time. And so maybe it's time to do that. Time to just share your heart with him. Just commune with him. Begin the process of learning to talk to him about whatever it is that's on your mind. Now, very often, that might lead to some sort of request. Okay? But what we call petitionary prayer, okay, making requests, this is simply a minor aspect of this total relationship that God's inviting us into. And yet, if it's something that God longs to do. You think about petitionary prayer, we go, let's minimize it. And yet, on the other hand, we go, no, God actually wants us to be a significant part of our life with Him. And it's not that He needs our appeals to be informed or empowered to do anything. Okay, He's already as good, as informed, as concerned, and as powerful as He's ever going to be. You can't change that. You can't fix that for Him. You can't make God better. But because the relationship with us is His highest agenda for us, He constructs things in such a way that a loving relationship with Him will be facilitated. So He's determined that certain things will only be done through prayer. And we can sort of think of it this way. Because a loving relationship with us is God's highest agenda, He gives us say-so in the universe. He gives you and me freedom to make choices all day, every day. And we talked about this several times in Berkeley before. If you've been around for a while, you've heard me use this illustration. But God could have made creatures that always do what He wants, right? He could have pre-programmed us to do nothing but His will, to do nothing but good, whatever He determines good is, all the time. The problem is, if He did that, real love wouldn't be possible. He couldn't truly have a loving relationship with us, okay? So here's the example. And like I said, I've used this 1,000 times, I just can't think of anything better. You think about a computer. Okay? Now I can program my screensaver to say whatever I want, right? I can program it to say, I love you, Jason. You're good looking, and you're smart, and you are very special to me. I love you. And I can even program computers to believe me. Okay, but when I go into my office and I turn that thing on and I see that and I read it, does it stir me deeply in my heart? Okay, I hope not. I mean, otherwise I need like psychiatric attention. I should not be standing up here anymore. It's not meaningful to me because it's a computer. Okay, it's a machine that only does what it's been programmed to do. Actually, I don't have a Mac. I have a HP. And so half the time it's not doing what it's been programmed to do. You get what I'm saying? My computer telling me that it loves me because that's what I programmed it to say, it doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Okay? Why? Because it isn't real love. Now, when my kids tell me they love me, okay, if my wife tells me she loves me, that's different. It's different because they have the freedom to make choices. They are self-determining persons. They can choose to love or not. They can choose to express love or not. They can choose to act out love or not. Now see, God could have created pre-programmed people, but it would have excluded the possibility of real love. So He's given us all of this freedom to make choices every day. He's given us real say-so in this world, in this universe. You know, we can be kind or we can be mean. We can be generous or we can be selfish. We can fix problems or we can create problems. We can love or we can hate. We can give or we can take. We can heal or we can hurt. And our say-so has real consequences for real people in our world. God wants us to love, but He gives us the freedom to choose not to. And when you think about it, it's kind of staggering that God gives us this power. But if He wants to have a real relationship with us, He has to. Little pre-programmed people, like computer people, can't love. We have to be self-determining for love to be possible. Okay, so God grants human beings a good deal of power to determine outcomes, to have some degree of say-so in our little corner of the universe. Now, petitionary prayer, okay, or making requests, and this is huge that we get this. Petitionary prayer or making requests is simply the spiritual side of the power to influence that God gives to us as human beings. Like the same way God ordains that he won't do everything he wants on a physical level in our world, in order to give us the freedom to be self-determining, he also ordains things so that he will not always do exactly what he wants in the spiritual realm. He gives us say-so on a spiritual level for the exact same reason he gives us say-so on a physical level. He gives it to us to facilitate our freedom, like our personhood. And in the end, the possibility of a real and loving relationship with him. You think about how relationships work. In order for there to be a genuine relationship, there has to be some sort of give and take between both sides. Okay? In other words, in any genuine relationship, to some extent, both parties have to be empowered over and above each other to some degree. And this is just as true in our relationship with God. God doesn't want to be the only one calling the shots. Is that crazy? See, a monopoly of power by one person, even if that person is God, always squashes the personhood of others. So God ordains things so that we are to some degree empowered. He ordains things so that we can actually influence him. Not because he needs it, but because he wants us. And this is why Jesus insists that God wants us to make requests. You think about Luke chapter 18, 1-5, where it says, "Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought." Not a great judge. "And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, 'Grant me justice against my adversary.'" Okay? She's a nobody coming before a judge who doesn't care about anything. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, "Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me." Okay, this judge doesn't fear God, doesn't care about people, Jesus says, and yet because this widow keeps coming, he eventually caves. He eventually gives her what she wants. Now, if we don't understand what Jesus is saying here, what he's trying to communicate, it can sound like he's saying something like this. Look, if you keep pestering God, who knows? Maybe he will wear him down and he'll give you what you want. But to read it that way is to completely misunderstand. This parable isn't a comparison, it's a contrast. Jesus is saying, okay, if a heartless judge would grant the request of a widow that's absolutely worthless to him, how much more would your loving Father, who cares for you more than you can possibly know, how much more would he be willing to grant the request of a child he adores? See, it's a contrast. It's not a comparison. Or you think of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, 7-11. He said, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone?" Just love the picture of that. Come on, bread, get here. Or if he asks for a fish, we'll give him a snake. It's a disturbing thought when you really think about it. And he says, if you then, though you are evil, okay, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? And Jesus says, okay, again, guys, think about your kids. When they come to you and they ask for stuff, do you want to give it to them? Don't you want to give it to them? And the truth is, as human parents, okay, even though we're all deeply flawed, even though I can be selfish, I got all these issues, we want good things for our kids. We want to give them good things. And Jesus says, look, in God, we're talking about perfect love. We're talking about absolute love. How much more does God want to say yes to requests? So he longs for us to come to him, Jesus says. Now, for those of you, one of the most difficult aspects of parenting, like good parenting, is that sometimes we have to say no, right? For those of you that are parents, that sucks. As much as we always want to give our kids what it is that they want, because we love them, sometimes we have to say no. And as parents, we know that always getting everything that they want isn't good for them. Or maybe we know that the particular thing that they're asking for won't be good for them. Like, we know more than they do. We see more than they do. We're wiser than they are. And often, they don't understand. Sometimes we have to say no, and there really is not a good way to help them understand why. When you think about 2 and 3-year-olds, they're asking you for something and it's legit to them, and you're going, no. And you can't explain in 2 or 3-year-old language to them why they can't have it. You just like, Mommy said so, Daddy said so. Trust me. Trust my heart, kid. And this is one of the hardest parts of parenting, right? Well, Jesus, it's the same for God. Sometimes he has to say no, and very often we don't understand. You take the difference between us and a 2-year-old, and you take the difference, as parents, and you take the difference between us and God. As God, okay, the gap is a little bigger between us and God. And Jesus says, look, know this. He wants to give you good things. He wants you to ask. So be bold in your request and trust in his heart, because he listens. You go back to the wedding in Cana. Jesus had a plan for his ministry. He had a plan for how things would go. And it didn't include revealing his divine nature at this wedding. But Mary comes, and Mary asks, and Jesus responds. Apparently, there's some wiggle room in God's plans. He allows for requests, and he adjusts. In fact, he more than allows for them. Jesus is telling us he longs for them. And this is so central to our thinking about prayer. So I just want to wrap up today by asking you this. Is there something going on in your life that really matters to you? Is there something that you find yourself thinking about all the time? Is there something that, maybe God is longing for you to come to him, to talk to him about it, like to make a request even? Because you think, what if he really does love you like a father? What if he really does want to give you good gifts? What if he really does give you some say-so in the spiritual realm? And maybe if you're honest, whatever it is that's going on with you, and we've all got something going on with us, whatever it is that's going on with you, you haven't really talked to him about it very much. Or maybe you've decided that, you just need to wait. But in your waiting, you aren't talking to him. You aren't asking. But have you ever considered this? That maybe you aren't waiting on him. Maybe he's waiting on you. Maybe certain things will only be done through prayer. And then maybe he's designed it that way on purpose.